welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Tanya Janka, and this is
Terry Radical.
And welcome to our talk, DIY, Do-It-Yourself, Azure Security Assessment. So what are we going to talk about today? Just so you know you're in the right room. So we're going to talk about all of you doing it yourself in Azure. So how to turn on the security things, what to go look at, what to check. If for some reason you feel security is not a priority, then you might be in the wrong room, but I'm assuming that you're all in the right room and that you want to learn how to have more secure experiences in Azure. So the mandatory About Us slide. So I am Tanya Janka, and on the internet, I'm She Hacks Purple, and I work at Microsoft. I am a cloud advocate. I'm totally obsessed with OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project. And then I'm also one of the founders of WOSEC, Women of Security. We had a meetup earlier this morning, and it was great. So also with me is...
So I am Terry Radical, and obviously my slide's a lot more boring than Tanya's. But I just have a lot of security certifications, and I've got a Master of Software Engineering, Master of Security Engineering. If any of you know about SANS, I have the GSE, which is under 250 of us in the world, and it's pretty hard to get. I've been really focused on cloud security for the past few years. I helped Capital One and some other companies move to the cloud, and now I have my own company. I actually taught for SANS Institute for a while, but now I teach my own cloud security class that I wrote, and I do assessments and pen testing. Yes. And the other thing I want to say is I met Tanya last year at a conference, and we accidentally switched rooms and went in the wrong room. That's how we met. And as I was talking to her, one of the things I really liked was that we share similar opinions about training developers in security and getting security into your pipeline. So I said, wouldn't it be great if we talked, spoke together someday? And here we are. So it's pretty cool. Yes. So what is a security assessment? Some of you may know this, but a security assessment is where you basically look at your environment and you try to find things that could lead to a security problem. So vulnerabilities in your software or other security gaps. It may be broad. It may include scanning systems. It may include interviews to ask people how they're doing things, to look at processes. It could include an architecture review. And at the end, you generally deliver a report. Okay, so what is a pen test? We just want to get this out of the way. A pen test is a little different, and the main difference between a pen test and a security assessment is that it includes exploitation. So when I find those vulnerabilities, I'm actually going to try to attack them, get into your environment. I want to pivot. I want to see if I can get at some data or something like that, exfiltrate data or do something else in your cloud. Maybe I want to spit up an instance with a crypto miner on it. And then typically you have a target objective that you're trying to go after, and you're trying to prove that systems can be broken into. At the end, you again deliver a report.
Okay, so why do you want to do this yourself, right? So there's not really enough Terrys to go around. You can't all have your own Terry. And we don't all necessarily have a security team that has as much time or as many people on it as we wish we did. So you, as people who use Azure, you can go in and secure a whole ton of these things yourself. And you don't necessarily need to go through your security team or security professional. So we want all of you to have the power and the tools to go and do things yourself, so you don't have to wait. Because I want you and we want you to be secure now. So the first thing before you do anything, never test the Azure Fabric. That's the infrastructure of the cloud. If you do that, Microsoft will be upset with you. And I don't know about you, but I would like it if they're never upset with me. They have a lot of lawyers, and it's best to just not do things you're not supposed to do, so just don't do that. And also, it's really nice if you tell us you're coming. So if you could just fill out the little form and notify us, that would be great. You don't have to. But notifying everyone, it helps. It helps us know what's going on. And sometimes, if you're doing something really weird with your testing, if we know you're doing a test, then we're like, fine. But if we see something, we're like, no, I don't think so. So if you want to have a nice, smooth test, it's a good idea to tell us, if you could. That would be nice. So out of scope for this talk. So we're just going to talk about securing the cloud. We're not going to talk about DevOps security, application security, securing your APIs. We're not going to talk about how to manage your passwords. We're not going to do physical security, all of those things. We're only going to talk about Azure Cloud Security. Also out of scope for this talk is Rickrolling. There will be no more after this slide. So up next, let's do this.
All right, let's.
Okay, so
Okay, so defining scope. So the first thing you do with an assessment is you define the scope. And the reason you define the scope, if you're doing this for a customer, you define the scope so you could tell them, you're not testing things or touching things that are out of scope. But the other reason is you can show what was tested and what was not tested, what you looked at and what you didn't. And so there's a number of things that can go into defining scope. For example, your data protection, application security, network security, access controls. So those are all kind of standard security things that you can look at, right? And then you have the cloud security controls. We're going to talk about a lot of those today, like what you have in Azure that you can secure. And then you have, in some assessments, we'll look at the cloud provider security itself, like how secure is Azure. That's asking a lot of questions. And then the two other things you probably want to look at is governance. How are you making sure that people are following your security rules? And then architecture. So you could have a bunch of different individual controls that you set up, but you want to look at the overall architecture of how all those things work together. And typically when you're defining your scope, you're going to talk about your methodology, how you're going to go about doing the test, the people who are involved, and the time frame. The other thing that you want to think about, and even if you're hiring someone or you're doing it yourself, is, well, do we want to look at those things that are external to the cloud? Because you have a lot of things that are connecting to the cloud that could potentially have some sort of security impact, or are you just going to focus inside of Azure?
So here's the scope of our assessment. So this talk came out of basically me asking Terry to come help me secure my open source project. So I am one of the leaders of DevSlop, Sloppy DevOps. It's an open source project where we learn where we as security people weave ourselves through the DevOps environment, right? And so we have a website, devslop.co, and it is my proof of concept, and I smash the crap out of it all the time. And so my entire Azure subscription was in scope, the SQL database, the network, all the crap that I should have removed from previous demos, but I hadn't yet. That counts. Terry can beat that up. And then virtual machines, and if I had containers, they would have been in scope. But to be clear, we didn't really hack the web app itself. And so we have a couple articles and videos about what we did so that you could actually follow through step by step, because we could be here all week talking about this, and we were told we have to actually stop at 3. So just so you know, like, you can go deeper and deeper into this if you want to with us. Okay, so number one advice for every single person in this room and on the planet is turn on multi-factor authentication. Turn it on. If there's a subscription that can do anything at all, turn it on, because those are the keys to your kingdom, right? So that's the very first thing. Just look at that. If that's not turned on, please turn it on. And then the next thing that you want to look at, so while you're looking through things in Azure, you want to look at identity and access management. So we want to set roles within Active Directory, so Azure Active Directory, because you're in Azure. What roles are is like, what do you do in your organization and what do you need access to? You can create custom roles, which you should, unless, there's 3 people in your company. If you're in a startup, that's cool. But if you work for a slightly larger company like I do, you might want to make your own roles. So you can set policies about Azure AD and who can access what, who can do what. And the whole purpose of all of this is least privilege. So who here has heard of least privilege before? Yes, I love how many hands just went up. So you want to give everyone all the things they need to do their job and nothing more. So if bad guys, and I mean that in a gender-neutral way, get in to your organization, that they can do the least amount of damage possible. So one of the things you can do to achieve least privilege is, if you're going to write an app and it's going to access the database or Key Vault or whatever, give it a service account. So that's not a person's account. So like me as a developer, I do not add my credentials to an app. I create a service account. So just, well, who's a developer here? Who writes code? That message is for you. Please don't forget. Thank you. And so you can literally give access or take away access to every single thing in Azure, which is beautiful. There's nothing that's not covered by that. It works in multi-cloud situations. So let's say you have AWS and Azure for your organization. You can have Azure AD go into both, or vice versa. You can have the AWS identity management system go into Azure. You need to make sure that it's all managed in one system. That's really important. And it also works with Azure Stack. So if you are running Azure in your own environment, in your own data center, same deal, Azure Active Directory for the win. Oh, and we're going to have a bunch of, see this at the bottom, short links. So for each, oops, wait. No, sorry, I'm spoiling your slides. So for each, like so many of these slides, we're going to have a link a short link with the idea that if you're like, oh, that interests me, then you can go step by step through how to do these things, because we want this to be the beginning of this relationship and not the end. Okay, your turn.
All right, so what Tanya was just talking about is all, IAM and permissions and things like that. The next thing you want to look at is how are you using the Azure structure for your governance, so you can set up your account. And typically in Azure, you are going to set up a single account for your company. Sometimes there's multiple, but I've heard very few. And then within that account, you set up subscriptions. And those subscriptions are generally tied to billing. So you want to have a different department pay for different subscriptions. But above subscriptions are something called management groups. And what you can do is you can create and apply policies at this management group layer. One of the things you want to do is kind of deduplicate, so you're not creating the same policy in a bunch of places, because what happens? You need to go change that policy, you need to change it in 6 different places. So you want to think about that concept, but you also want to think about segregation of duties, right? You don't want to give someone admin access, to the whole account. You might have different teams that are only allowed to access their own systems and things like that, or dev, QA, prod, things like that. And the other thing you can do is look at, are you automating your governance? So you're going to hear some more about policies today. What happens when someone does something wrong? Are you automating that and looking at it? The other thing is, are you looking at things at an organizational level? Is someone looking at the whole organization? And there's ways you can do that monitoring from a higher level if you have a big company. So another really cool thing, if you don't know where to start, is the Center for Internet Security. And I really like this group. They are a crowdsourced group that will tell you best security practices. And so it's not just one organization going, here's what you should do. It's a number of organizations, including corporations, governments, academic institutions. And they have various things you can use. The first one is called the CIS controls. If you're in security, you may have heard of this, the 20 critical controls. Basically, this is organizational-wide best practices that you can follow. And it started more for on-premises, so you're going to see some things that don't apply, like your wireless network or something. But there are still some things that do apply. And the cool thing about these rules is that they're just not something someone made up. They're based on attack vectors. What are the most common attack vectors people are using to break into organizations? So some of the things are applicable to cloud, and some things are actually easier to do in the cloud, in my opinion. So here's an example that just to give you an idea of what they look like. Inventory and control of software assets. So you get a vulnerability in your software, you need to know where it's running, right? So you can update it. And the second one is controlled use of administrative privileges, something like Tanya was talking about just a minute ago. You want to know who's an admin, and there's some rules that you can follow here. So there's just a list of things you can do. The other really cool thing they do is something called the CIS benchmarks. These are free. You can go download them. Very cool. You can see here, this is a list of Microsoft items. There's all kinds of things, Kubernetes, Docker, whatever you're doing. And these, again, will be the best practices for that particular platform. So if you're not sure where to start to secure your systems, you can download and you can look at this, and they'll give you some ideas. The other cool thing is that you can go out and configure all your systems yourself if you want to. But if you are willing to pay 2 cents an hour, then you can go out and you can get systems that CIS has already hardened for you, that are already set up with these security best practices from the Azure Marketplace. Sorry. That's okay. So the CS benchmarks, here's an example, just to give you an idea. Again, this is something, restrict access to Azure AD Administrative Portal. It actually tells you what setting to go set for this best practice. And this is part of the Azure platform security best practices. And this is the second part. There's actually 3 parts to it, but one of them is audit steps. And this is really important because you'll see a lot of security assessment frameworks where they ask you a question, and you're like, yeah, I think we do that. Someone could kind of say whatever they wanted, and you check a box. These are actual steps that you can go through. So you set it up according to the benchmarks. An auditor can come in and actually test that, did you do that? And they can go check. So that's pretty cool.
This is Azure Security Center. I feel like I got to do the best slide in the whole presentation because this was my favorite part. So who here has seen Azure Security Center before? Yes, all those arms look great. Clearly, all of you got extra strength when you ate lunch instead of falling asleep. So Azure Security Center is a dashboard within Azure where you can see every single security thing you've ever dreamed of and more. And I know that we said in our demonstration that we were going to do 80% demos, but then when we saw just how many things there were, I'm like, Terry, we're going to be teaching for a week. And so we tried to summarize some of the things into higher level things and then make videos of other things for you to follow up. And so this is Azure Security Center, and there's a link there with more information, ASC and me. I affectionately call it ASC. But the main things I want you to see here is that along the left, there's a whole bunch of different options there. So each one of those goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And then there's 3 big main sections, and you can only see 2 here. So the first one's policy and compliance. So do I have my policies turned on? Which one do I have turned on? How am I doing on my policies? And then below that is security, resource security and hygiene. So it will let you drill down all the way to the virtual machine level or the app service level, all the way down, and then tell you, like, that one's missing this patch, go get it. And then after that is threat protection, which I'm going to show you more slides about. Okay, remember I said at the beginning, turn on MFA, turn on multi-factor authentication? You also need to actually turn on Azure Security Center. It's like all tools. When you don't turn it on or use it, it doesn't work as well. And so we have like this nice, beautiful blue circle. That is what you want to have, where everything is turned on. And so it makes sure that you have your subscriptions covered. Previously, when I did things on-premise, I never got like this beautiful, like, it's on or it's off, it's true or it's false thing. It was always like digging around, scanning things, pinging things with Nmap. So this is quite nice for me. I want to talk about policy for just a second. So previously, I hated policy because to me, policy meant a web page with a lot of words on it that were lawyer speak that I didn't really understand, and I had to read at least 6 times to be like, what am I supposed to do? Could you just tell me? I'm a nerd. Just tell me, go turn on HTTPS if that's what you want. That is not what is here. That's not what I'm talking about. Policy in Azure means you set a whole bunch of rules, and then it tells you these people are breaking those rules here. And so it gives you a picture immediately, like literally a picture, but also like a list of prioritized things. So if you're like, every new website needs HTTPS only, or everyone must have MFA turned on, you should have that. Then it will give you a prioritized list, which we'll look at later. You can set your own policy, or you can just take the default Azure security policy that is in place from the beginning, but I suggest adding more strict rules and working up to a higher level. And
so we're going to tell you about zero trust. How many people here have heard of zero trust? Right? Okay, a few of you. Okay, so zero trust, a lot of times it's talked about in terms of networking, and it started out with people who would create firewall rules, and they would say everything outside of those firewall rules on the internet we don't trust, and you would have some extra security, but once you got inside past that firewall, they're like, okay, well, we know this system, it's good, we trust it, and you maybe have a little bit more lax rules. So the idea of zero trust is you no longer trust those things inside that environment. This includes networking, but it includes more than that. And you want to make sure you authenticate, you want to have MFA, you want to validate your inputs, things like that. It's just basically no more trusted systems. Everything gets verified. And so that kind of relates to cloud networking. So I'm going to tell you a couple things. I did the networking for Capital One for all our accounts for a while. So this is something that's really important. Attackers love flat networks. Yes. Flat networks mean there's no security rules inside that perimeter. Like everything can access everything, and that's bad. We don't want to allow attackers to do that because they can pivot around and get to other systems, right? If you don't, so I'll show you some pictures of how to fix that problem. But if you have good network design, there's a few things that it helps with. One is it's going to limit your attack surfaces, so what people can get at. It reduces your attack vectors, the ways in which they can attack things. It makes malware easier to spot if you set up your networks correctly, and it makes an attacker's job harder. So here's an example that I hope kind of proves my point. So I actually asked this person for permission. I saw this great post on Twitter just like a week ago. I was like, oh, that's great. So maybe some of you in here use Confluence. Basically, it's a place where developers can go in and write information about projects they're working on, share information, files, and pictures and things like that. And so companies will use this, and a developer might think, well, it's fine. I have SSL and I have authentication, so it's good, right? The reason you might want to put that on your private network is because anytime there's a vulnerability in any system exposed to the internet, it can then be scanned, it can then be attacked. So what this guy did was he found a vulnerability in Confluence, and he thought, how can I find more systems that have, that are exposed to this vulnerability? He used something called Google Dorks. Google Dorks is a way to search for bad things in Google that are exposed. You might be searching for keys or passwords or some sort of pattern that exposes some security problem. So he figured out how to search for this vulnerability in Google, and basically he says he was able to exploit 50 companies in 6 hours. So if those systems had all been on a private network, he would have not been able to find them. So the other thing you want to do is use network security groups and routes to your advantage. So in Azure, the network security groups are kind of optional. Like, you don't necessarily have to have them. So you want to make sure you're turning those on, using them on your systems. And again, you want to use that least privilege. But the CIS says to block RDP, SSH, and SQL from the internet. And I'll show you how to do that. If you're wondering, like, well, then how do I get to my systems? I'll show you that. But we can even do better than that. So think about that zero trust concept I told you. We just only want to allow what is absolutely necessary to the internet and within our network. So if a certain application server only has to talk, it's the only thing that should be talking to this database, set up your network security group rules to enforce that. There's some queries down here you can use to look at those things. One other thing I forgot on this slide was routes. So routes say where traffic can go, right? And you can give something a route to the internet or not. So when you're setting up your subnets, for example, you can say this has a route to the internet or it doesn't. So if you set up, as I'm going to show you a little bit, a 3-tier architecture, you can say this subnet does not ever need to talk to the internet. Take that route out of there.
Root?
Routes.
Route?
That's in case there's any Canadians there, just translate. So Network Watcher. So there's some cool tools you can use in, there's something called Network Watcher. It's kind of part of Security Center you can drill down into. And it's very cool. If you do the networking or you're into networking, there's a whole bunch of things listed on the side there, and I can't tell you all of them, but definitely go take a look at that. But one of them is your effective security group rules. So when you're trying to figure out if a particular virtual machine is exposed to the internet, for example, you can go in there and put that virtual machine in, and then you can run this, and it will tell you all the rules that apply. So I mentioned a couple things earlier. I said sometimes you have subnets that don't need access to the internet. So this is our typical 3-tier architecture, and it's still applicable in the cloud. You want to use defense in depth. This is kind of a standard thing that a lot of people use on premises, and you can still do it in the cloud. You can give your web tier access to the internet. You can set it up so that your web tier can talk to your app tier, and your app tier can talk to your data tier. But notice in this case, the web tier cannot talk directly to the data tier. And when we say flat network, it's like everything is in the same pod. It can all talk to each other. That's not good practice. We want to set up this 3-tier architecture.
Definitely.
Oh, and one other thing on that slide, sorry. You'll notice that you're going to have a lot of junk hitting your web tier, right? You're going to have a lot of noise, a lot of traffic hitting your web tier. Once it gets past that web tier, you shouldn't really be seeing denied traffic, right? Because that's good. That should be things either they're misconfigured or potentially you have malware if you're seeing denied traffic within there. So it'll be easier to spot malware. Another cool tool, so if you're trying to look at your 3-tier network, is in there, there's Network Watcher has topology. And topology will give you kind of a graphical view. And sometimes it's hard to visualize when you're looking at all these cloud resources, like what's going on. This will make it a little easier for you. Another really nice feature of Azure is the Azure Firewall. And so what this does is you can set the Azure Firewall in between your systems and external networks, and it has different capabilities. You can make DNS rules, for example. There's some other capabilities in there you can take a look at. And it does cost a little bit more. The network security groups, you're going to be able to turn on pretty easily. But you want to make sure that this is on, if at all possible, that you have logging on, so you're logging what's going through there, and also monitoring it.
There's lots of seats. Come on in. Lots and lots. There's a bunch reserved at the front. Just sit in them. Who cares?
And so I mentioned earlier, you're saying, you're telling me don't expose port 22.3.3.8.9 to the internet. Well, how am I supposed to access my systems, right? Well, this is where you want to use the things I'm going to talk about in the next 2 slides. The first one is a VPN. And the way a VPN works is you can set up a VPN to access your systems from your corporate environment and vice versa, or even when you're roaming around. And then it has a specific IP range, so you can set those rules in your firewall to allow that, but instead of the whole internet. And the other thing is, on this picture, we show you an IPsec VPN. What this does is it creates an encrypted tunnel. It's also authenticated. And so all that traffic going through that tunnel, you won't be able to see a lot of information in there. It'll just look all encrypted if someone tries to sniff that traffic. And the next thing you can do is Azure ExpressRoute. This is something you can set up within a data center. So if there's a data center that has the ability to connect directly to Azure, or if they can add it, you can set up a direct connection in your data center to Azure. And that's another way to avoid that. Actually takes the traffic completely off the internet. And then finally, you want to look at a bastion host. I've seen some articles that say, oh, we don't need a bastion host. I'm like, yes, you do. So let me explain that. I actually have something on my blog about this if you want to know kind of deeper. But a bastion host is, or otherwise known as a jump box or a jump host, if you've never heard that term before, is a box where you log into that virtual machine to get to other virtual machines. And what this does for you, and it could be a bunch of virtual machines behind a load balancer, but it's just a limited number of systems that you expose to the internet. And you can lock those down, you can make sure they're very secure, you can limit what permissions, and you can just do really heavy logging on those machines. And what this does is it protects you from brute forcing that SSH, especially when you combine that with a VPN or an ExpressRoute, and brute forcing RDP. Those are good things. And Tanya's going to tell you about something else that's really cool related to this.
So first thing I want to talk about, like in this slide, is cloud native security. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about, like versus a jump host, like you can use something called JIT. But the idea of cloud native security things are things that are native to Azure, or if you're in another cloud provider, that are native to that cloud provider. And I've heard some people talk about how like the biggest threat to security is like vendor lock, but you're already in the vendor, so you should just take advantage of all the cool stuff that you're paying for. This is my very biased opinion, but you're already in there. And so cloud native things are things that are part of Azure, like built in. And so there's a list that's a mile long, but I'm just going to cover right now adaptive application controls and then just-in-time virtual machine access. So Terry was just talking about doing going to a bastion host or a jump box and then entering the network. So you go in, you authenticate, you do all your stuff, you go through a VPN, and then you have to authenticate and do all the stuff again. It's really hard to get through there. But another thing you could do is just have everything closed so no one can ever see it. So I don't have a jump box on my little network for DevSlop. Instead, I have just-in-time access control. So I have things on the internet with every single port permanently closed. And then when I want to use it, what I do is I go to this little screen here in Azure Security Center. So I have this VM called DevSlop DCheck. All it does is run OWASP Zap, OWASP Dependency Check, and Burp Suite. So it's my like little hacker VM. So I flip it on when I want to damage, and turn it off again. It's very important to me that no one gets control of this. It would be very, very, very bad if someone took my hacking machine and then aimed it at something it should not be aimed at, obviously, right? So all the ports are closed all the time. So I go here, I request access, nice button, and then I come over here, and so let's say I want a remote desktop in, so I need to open port 3389. So all other 65,000 ports are closed, right? So I toggle it on, and then I say how long I want it. I used to pick 1 hour. It turns out I think I'm fast, but like reality, that's not true. And so 3 hours might be better, but you just like flick it on again if you run out of time. So this means in 3 hours, it will automatically close. And then there's also the part that I didn't highlight here, which is really cool, which is the VPN, so my IP or an IP range. So it will automatically only accept things from my IP. So I do like a lot of internet streaming because I'm a giant nerd, and I'll flick this on, and people say to me, like, aren't you worried that while you're streaming, someone's gonna try to brute force your machine? I'm like, no, first of all, they have to fake that they're from my IP address. They have to figure out what IP address it has. then they have to try to brute force a random 64-bit character. Also, Azure is watching. It's going to be like, just going to stop it. No, go away. Like, it will see. And so I'm like, no, I'm not scared. And so this is an option for you. Another thing, so a separate thing that I also have on here is called adaptive application controls, or in other words, application waitlisting. So I only run 3 apps on this virtual machine. That's all it does. It just runs my 3 little hacker tools. So I have those on a list of those are okay. If any other thing named anything else tries to turn on, it's blocked. So if someone somehow tries to get malware on there, it won't start because of this. So that's a pretty cool defense. Definitely, you want to have this on your production servers. Okay, so the last thing that's in Azure Security Center in the big main screen is advanced threat protection, and it gives you alerts as to what things are happening that you're doing wrong. So Azure tells on me a lot. So it will give me alerts, and then sometimes if I ignore them, if they're red, it will tell my boss on me. Because I like to do proof of concepts and break things. But it will tell me over time the things that are happening here, and you have an immediate visual representation of what's going on. And so it will email you or call you or whatever you have set up, but then you can click on this and it will take you down into the incident, help you manage the incident, help you investigate the incident, and then help you even make a playbook to automate stuff to happen the next time this behavior happens. So you can say, oh, if this happens on the virtual machine, shut down the virtual machine. Okay, so here are some of the previews of my alerts. So I would like to note that this is a demo account, and I put awful things in here on purpose, and my real account is beautiful and pristine, and I never have alerts because I'm perfect. But it'll tell you, suspicious activity, like, oh, it's been doing this to your keys or whatever, and it gives you this nice list of things that might be happening that you should take a look at. It's really, really helpful. So one more thing. So threat protection used to just be like an advanced data protection. It just did certain things, but we just added protection for storage accounts. So it'll tell you, oh, it looks like someone's copying a lot of things out of your storage container. Does that seem like a good idea to you? So we just added that, so I thought I would just add a little bit about that there, because it's good. Storage is important. I'm sure we have all read about people putting very sensitive things in a storage container, and then it being public, and then very, very bad things happening to them, like being fired. And none of us want to be fired.
We don't. So the next thing you want to make sure you have turned on is a WAF. So WAF is a web application firewall. And what this does is it looks at the traffic from the perspective of layer 7, meaning you've got a full HTTP request, and it's going to parse through there and find bad things. Some of the things Tanya loves, like the OWASP top 10, it's going to go in there and block. SQL injection, that type of thing, cross-site scripting. So it's going to look through there and try to find those problems and reject them. It's a really good idea to use this. And in fact, at Capital One, we just said every single web server has to have this in front of it. And additionally, you can put it in front of APIs, right? And we just created a template and said, okay, everyone has to run a WAF, period. This is a really good thing to do. When you turn on your WAF, of course, as with everything, you want to make sure you have logging turned on and that you're also monitoring it.
Mm-hmm. And you don't have to use the Azure WAF. You could use all sorts of WAFs, but I work for them, so I want you to use that one, just to be clear. But
it's all built in.
Yeah, but all of these things, like there's all sorts of different WAFs that exist.
And so this is just an example of the WAF rules. So this is the OWASP rules. Again, we mentioned the top 10 rules. And it will go through here and try to find out if one of those is happening. You can turn them on and off. And did you have something else you want to? She loves OWASP.
Yeah, I love OWASP. Okay, so like the core rule set are the signatures, and it's pages and pages of regular expressions of this looks good or this does not look good. And the latency is really, really slow on it, and it will get all sorts of obvious attacks, just take them all off. But you don't want to make your WAF too tight. If you put it like up to 100% or whatever, you might block real actual problems. So I suggest first turning it on low or just turning it on with alerts, and then make sure that all the awesome traffic is going through that's supposed to, so you don't no one likes it when you block a real customer, right? So proceed with caution, carefully, you'll have good experiences. That's right. Thank you.
And then there's Network Watcher has another thing. Well, actually, before even Network Watchers, your network security groups, I said you should turn those on, right? We want to use that whitelisting. And I mentioned if you're looking at those logs and those internal subnets and something is blocked, that's probably something you want to go investigate, either it's misconfigured or has security problem, and so you need to turn on your network security group flow logs so you can get that data. And the other thing you can use is in Network Watcher, it has something called traffic analytics. So I'll try to summarize the data here. It will also tell you if you have it turned on. So in this case, I have 2 out of 4 network security groups turned on. That's bad. I need to go turn on the other ones, right? So you can monitor some of that stuff here from Network Watcher. The other thing Network Watcher has, which I personally love, is the packet capture functionality. And I wrote a paper on packet capture in the cloud because someone at SANS told me it wasn't possible, and I was like, yes, it is, and I went and did it. I still actually love this feature because I had to do like a whole bunch of weird things to get it to work. And this is just an example. Just a couple days ago, I turned it on. You can set a time frame. You can choose your VM, turn on the packet capture, and then I pulled down the PCAP, and it was really quick, and I looked at the data, which I have here. It's not inline, so you don't get that, but you can definitely run your different tools over it after the fact or use it for investigation or troubleshooting. So, you know, as always, turn on all your logging, any kind of logging. Tanya's been saying the same thing, turn it all on. You want to be able to go in there and look at all different types of logs. The other reason why logs are really important, if you're in security, you already know this, but you need to maintain something called chain of custody when you have an incident, and you need to make sure the logs are properly handled. If you don't, you may go to court and lose because you haven't maintained proper chain of custody. They'll throw it out. The problem with that, and also the problem with no logs, is that when you have a security incident, sometimes you pay per record or you pay, you know, based on the scope of the breach. And so you want that to be small. And if you don't have any logs, you have no idea how many records were accessed or what happened. So as many logs as you can turn on. Some examples here, if you're familiar with an intrusion detection system or intrusion prevention system, like anything you might install that is looking at the packet level. Also DLP or data loss prevention, you know, if you have data going out of your account that shouldn't be, DNS logs, firewall logs, any kind of firewall logs, your load balancers, your content delivery network that's going to push all your, your stuff out to the edge. Anything you can, turn on those logs so you can have them for later.
All right. Yeah, you made so much. Okay, so if there's no logs, then I, as an instant responder, come in and I'm like, I have no idea what happened. How am I supposed to tell you? I'd just like to note that as an instant responder, when I walk in and then there's no logs, I'm like, I already look like an idiot. Because I want to help you, I want to find out what happened, and I want to fix it and figure out like how it happened, all the damage, fix everything, and with no logs, it's just, there's nothing there to look at. So please turn on your logs, thank you. Okay, rant over. So Azure Sentinel. So we want you to have a SIM. This is the new Microsoft SIM, but there's a whole bunch of SIMs out there. So it's a security, incident, and event management system. And the idea is it sucks up all your logs. You can create logs from your apps. Who here creates custom apps at your office? Like someone, yeah, so all of those log, right? And then it feeds into the SIM, right? Please do that. Because when it does that, then people watching the SIM know what's going on, and then they can go chase down problems, and then they can find threats maybe before they turn into serious things, or they can see incidents as they start instead of, 260 days after, which I think is the estimate of how long people can live on your network before you figure it out right now, which is terrifying. So you want to have a SIM, and you want to make sure you have qualified people watching it. You want to make sure you tune it as best you can so that you're not getting 65,000 alerts a day, because that will make you insane, and it won't help you, right? So you want to make sure you don't have too many false negatives, but you also want to walk that careful line so that you don't have thousands of false positives for every real thing. The first time I worked somewhere and we got a SIM, literally, I was like, okay, so we investigated the first 25 things today, and there's only 4,000 for tomorrow. Yeah, you can learn from my fun experiences. Okay, so your data is very important. We want you to protect your data, so your apps and the systems that create all of the data, right? Your data is your crown jewels of where you work, right? This is the top thing you want to protect. So in Azure, one of the cloud native defenses is called advanced data security, and it does 3 things. So one is we discover all your data, because sometimes you have things you don't realize. Like when I worked somewhere and it turned out we had 42 different tables that tracked the same ID, except none of them were the same. So that was fun. That was a whole project to fix that, right? So discover all your data and then classify it. So you know what is secret or classified or top secret or actually publicly available and not actually that big of a deal. And so you know how to treat it, right? And then the second thing is vulnerability assessment scanning. So this is like a button you can press and you just turn it on and it will email you and tell you, oh, we found this new thing. Oh, here's your weekly report. Tanya, you still haven't fixed that. And it helps you keep on top of what you should be doing with your database. And then the last thing is advanced threat protection. So it has a list of things it looks for, but basically it's like, well, that looks like bad news. I thought I should tell you. So it'll look, oh, it looks like you're vulnerable to SQL injection issues. It looks like someone's actually doing an SQL injection attack against you currently. Oh, it looks like someone's exfiltrating data, or like this really shady looking user just logged in. That's not you, what's going on here? And so it'll stop things or alert you depending upon what you set it up. This has saved my bum a few times. So here's my VA scan. So this is my open source project, and it is telling me the same things that it told me from the beginning, because I haven't had time, because open source projects are on the weekend, kind of off the side of your desk, right? So it's telling me, Tanya, you should have firewall rules. Yes, I should. You should not be using your DB owner to access all of the things in your app. You could probably use read-write or just read-only. It's true, that's very bad. And then also I didn't label the sensitivity of all my different data columns, so it doesn't know what is the sensitive data that it should watch more. And yes, I'm bad, I did those things. Okay, your turn.
Encryption. So I think you've probably heard by now it's a good idea to encrypt your data, right? Mm-hmm. If someone gets that data and it's properly encrypted, then they won't be able to read it, obviously. So where do we want to look for encryption? So if you're doing an assessment, you want to look at data that is stored somewhere. That's called at rest, right? It's in your database. It's in your storage account. And then we also want to look at it when it's in transit. So when it's flowing over the network, we want to see that it's encrypted there. Like I showed you for VPN, for example, it's encrypted. One of the big things with encryption is who has the key, who has access to the key. Because the key is just like the password to the data, right? So if they're able to get that key, your encryption is pretty much useless. They can use it, they can decrypt your data. So we want to make sure that the key is handled properly. You want to rotate that key, so if someone does get a hold of it, you're rotating it frequently enough that it's no good to them. Also, you want to make sure you're using the proper algorithms and modes, and the good thing is, if you use the Azure tools, they're going to help you with that, right? So Azure has something called Key Vault, and it's going to help you both in transit and at rest. You're going to have your encryption keys for your data. You're going to have SSL certificates over the network. And they also have something that is called a hardware security module, or HSM. You may or may not have heard of this, but some organizations, I used to work at a bank, and for a while, we thought we needed an HSM in the cloud. Turns out we didn't, but some organizations will have some sort of compliance or reason why they have to use a hardware security module. It is hardware, so technically it's better from a security standpoint. The problem is it's not very cloudy, right? It's not scalable, it's harder to automate, and if you have to fail over to a new region or something, it just causes problems. So you have those options you can take a look at.
Also, it's pricey.
And it costs a lot, a lot. And so, of course, with everything, what do we keep saying? Monitoring. So we're going to check and see, is encryption monitoring turned on wherever you can? And this is just an example of checking to see if your disks are monitored. So you have disks associated with your VMs, right? You want to make sure those are encrypted, and this example shows that I got a few problems here.
Back to Azure Security Center. So my favorite part of Azure Security Center is the recommendations tab. When you have set a policy, so if you have the default policy that comes with Azure, or if you've set your own policy, this is what you're going to see here is all of the rules that you are breaking in a prioritized order that are created by all of the super smart people that work at Microsoft. So we have a lot of really smart people, which is part of why I wanted to go there, so that they would teach me all of their smartness. And so they made this list. So as you can see, remember we talked the very first slide, turn on multi-factor authentication. See what's there? Number 1, turn on multi-factor authentication for all your subscriptions with owner permissions. Yes. So this is a list that will go down. So you can have this just look at one subscription. You can have this look at all your subscriptions. I really like this a lot for a whole bunch of reasons. So when I worked on previous security teams, it was really hard to show my boss that I was doing a good job because either, one, we were having an incident and my name was a swear word, or we were not having an incident and then he forgot who I was. But with this, you can see we actually give you a score, like a secure score, and the score goes up when you fix things. And if you make bad decisions, like let's put a whole bunch of virtual machines outside of the firewall randomly on the internet, that's a bad decision, and then your score will go down. And so you can actually see progress that you're making. You can check things off this list. And so when you click on each one of these, you will go down all the way down to the actual virtual machine that's missing the patch, or you will go to the app service or the functions app that is not forcing HTTPS, or whatever the thing is. It will bring you all the way down to the detail level. For me, this is magical. I don't want to I don't want to go do a paper survey with someone and be like, did you turn on multi-factor authentication? Because they're going to say yes, whether it's true or false. But Azure will tell me the truth, and I enjoy the truth even when it's bad truth. So now we're at the part where we're going to do the checklist. I'm seeing that we have 14 minutes left, so I don't want to be super. Do you want to do like a little demo? Do we have time?
Go for it.
Okay, would you rather have a demo of Security Center recommendations, or would you have more time for questions? Now, I realize I brought candy if you ask a question, so there's some bribery involved, and it's confusing how to make this decision, what's in your best interest. So put up your hand if you want demo of Azure Security Center, right? Okay, and then put up your hand if you want more question period time. Okay, we're getting a demo. All right. Okay, so please cut me off when we have 4 minutes left, because I'll just demo all day. I'm very bad for that. Okay, so this is Azure Security Center. So let's make this bigger. This is what my Security Center looks like. I'm going to make it bigger for you so you can see more. I'm going to close this away. So this is the top of, well, this is basically what Azure Security Center looks like. So when you first land in it, it's going to look like this. Do you see how much red I have? It's not all my fault, I swear. So my favorite part is recommendations, and you can get there by clicking here, or you can go over here and click here. Just to give you a brief overview, remember we talked about advanced cloud defense, like cloud native things. So this is the adaptive application controls that I want you to all turn on, and this is the just-in-time virtual machine access. I really want you to look at those things. But first of all, let's look at threat protection. So because we weren't sure if we're gonna have time to do a demo or not, I didn't do an SQL injection earlier this morning so that we could look at it, because I'm like, we will spend the whole time on that. But it's gonna tell me all the different things that it's seen. So remember we had all of those alerts earlier. So I deleted a lot of the boring ones from that demo. But like login from an unusual Azure data center. That's disconcerting, suspicious authentication activity. So if you click on it, it will show you more details about what happened and let you investigate it. Okay, so ASP.NET Service 01, that is not mine. If I change settings on it, I will be that security person that's in trouble and not invited to the social hour on Friday if I go change settings without permission. So what I would do is find out who owns this and talk to them about what happened. I have learned the hard way that if you just go and change things in Security Center without asking the person that owns it, it makes them very upset. When I started, my friend on my team, Damo, he's a DevOps guy. He's really amazing. He had accidentally made a demo where there's this virtual machine outside of our entire network with no firewall, no nothing on it. And someone was manually trying to brute force it for like 4 months. This was like the suckiest of all the hackers. I'm like, this person is not very good at hacking. And so I would refer to it as his little friend, and it was so great. But then eventually his friend lost interest, which was too bad because it made great demos. So remember, we talked about the security scores. So here you can see your score going up or down, right? And you can see how many points you get for each different thing. So I'm not going to show you Ignite the Tour. I'm going to show you my demo subscription, and I have 500 score points out of 700. So for instance, turn on MFA. I know I want to, but it's not a good demo if I don't have any vulnerabilities in my subscription, so I can't turn it on. But you should turn it on if you actually have things more than demonstrations in your subscription. It's going to tell me remediate the vulnerabilities in your SQL databases. Remember we were looking earlier about the tools, the VA that you can run automatically on your database. So it shows up here. It's like, Tanya, you haven't fixed that yet. I'm like, I know. require secure transfer to your storage account. I have a storage account, and I do not have encryption in transit set up on it, although I don't actually put anything in it, but still I should set that up so if I do put things in it, it would be secure. So, okay, we have 10 minutes left. I'm gonna go fast. So it's gonna go through and tell you all of the things that it would like you to do, right? And that's great. You can also separate it by area. So computes and apps are important, like missing patches, bad configs. But I would probably start with identity and access management, because if someone has messed with your identity on your subscription or within your Azure implementation, let's call it, your network, that's really, really scary to me. So first thing, enable multi-factor authentication. Absolutely, yes, we should. Oh, as if it's telling me my databases again. I feel like it's just going to tell me every time. So are these the same ones? Oh, I didn't click. Did I click on it? There we go. Oh, okay, so I guess it feels that I have a lot of problems with my identity. You can see that my network is green. That's pretty good. So if we click there, it should not be showing those. Am I on the internet still? Great. Demos are awesome. So remember we were talking about my overall security score. So as I fix these things, my score will go up, and I can actually show my boss I'm doing a good job, which is really, really magical for me personally. And lastly, we'll go back to, I just want to show you this one thing I haven't showed you yet, so regulatory compliance. So how many people have to abide by HIPAA or ISO 27000 or PCI compliant or SOC or something like that, right? We all have to do those things. I'm in Canada, and they just have different names, but it's very similar to all the things you do because we like to copy you. And so this is kind of a magical thing that they just added a few weeks ago, where you can see how you line up against the CIS benchmarks or how you line up against these things. And so that's amazing for me. Anyway, I think it's really great. So Azure CIS. So of the 26 controls, we have 14 of them going well. Great, so let's look at the ones that we don't have yet. I find the fact that it's telling me exactly what to do really, really helpful, as opposed to having to guess or manually look each thing up. So we want you to pass. Basically, that's what we want. We want you to have good security experiences, because then we hope that you will keep using our products. I mean, it's pretty selfish, right? Okay, so we're going to give you a checklist. This checklist is going to seem scary. It's going to seem overwhelming, but please don't get overwhelmed. Just do one thing, and then next week do the next thing, right? It's okay. You don't have to do this all today. Please try not to stress out when you see the checklist. Okay, so one, do you want to go back and forth like you do one, I'll do one? So setting scope, that's yours.
Okay, so scope. We talked about setting the scope before you do your assessment. So determine what is in scope, what's out of scope, what you're going to include on your report.
Absolutely. You want to verify your account structures. You want to make sure your identity and access controls are set to the things that you think they should be, and you want to make sure you're following best practices, which I know sounds vague, but when you look at things, you can tell, oh, it's a C-level exec, and they all have administrative privileges. No. You know that's wrong.
All right, so we want to set policies. We want to make sure that we are not, like she said, giving everyone admin access. Credentials are one of the biggest things contributing to breaches right now. And you want to make sure that you're doing governance like I talked about. Look at your account structures and make sure you have the correct policies and scope and the way we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. Turn on Azure Security Center. That's it.
Use the cloud native security features. This was some of the stuff Tanya went over with the cloud native controls that are built into Azure. Use them. They're there for you. One of my favorites is just in time. I think that's an awesome feature where you can just open up that network when you need it, close it when you're not. You just pretty much eliminated brute force, right?
Exactly. And as Terry said, networking best practices, so use network security groups. Make sure your access to compute and storage is locked down. Use Network Watcher. Watch your network. Use Azure Firewall, use ExpressRoute, and use a Bastion host or a jump box. I call it a jump box, and she calls it the real thing.
I don't know. It's not Canadian? No, I don't know. Always be on top of your alerts and logs for WAF, Azure Sentinel, all your logs, right? Mm-hmm. Get those logs into a SIM. You want to be able to correlate those events. You want to see what's happening. You want to be able to troubleshoot. You also, and stop security threats. And you also need those logs, as we mentioned, for potential data breaches and determining how big the breach was.
VA, scan everything. Automate it so you don't have to think about it, especially your databases.
Okay, encryption. You want to make sure, just encrypt everything. That's what we did at Capital One. Some companies don't. They try to determine what's in scope or not. You can do that, but to me, it's just easier if you just set policies and encrypt everything.
Yep. Monitor all that can be monitored. I know it's hard to do, but the sentence works.
And Tanya's favorite, and I actually like this too, follow the Security Center recommendations. I showed you the CIS benchmarks. Tanya just showed you like, hey, look, it just tells you right there. It's super easy. So use those recommendations and go in and do what they say.
So this is the very last thing. Once you do this, then call a professional, right? So you can do a whole lot of this yourself, and that is the point of this talk, right? So I'm going to give you a few resources. Did everyone get a picture of this slide that desires to have a picture of this slide? Because the next one's going to have a resource list on it, and I want to make sure you all get that. Is everyone good? Okay, ready? Next. Oh, what did we learn today? Oh, I'm sorry. We can do it ourselves. We can do this. We can do this. We can secure things. We can have a secure network. We can kick ass at this. Okay, so here's the resources. All right. So please take a picture of this. So this is articles we wrote and video, and then things like more in depth about the CIS benchmarks, because we didn't have those links earlier in the talk, because we really wanted you to take those best practices home. And I think everyone's camera's down good. Okay, so Thank you. Thank you for your time and attention today. Does anyone have any questions? I know we kept you right till the end, but you, sir. How do I feel about application security groups? I'm sorry, what are those?
ASGs are a subcomponent of NSG.
Oh, I don't know, that sounds cool. Honestly, I swear, I've never heard of it. Are those in Azure? Oh, wow.
Yes, they are.
Well, I mean, maybe you need to school me after. You earned a candy, so you know, this one's for you.
I believe they're at the application level, so you can be very specific, right? As opposed to being, more broad. Blanking out exactly what they do, but definitely if you can be more specific at an application layer, that's better, right? Be very specific about what can connect to what.
Okay. You, then you, then you. So there are some AppSec suggestions. So for serverless, it'll say, oh, you have core set to star. That's an awful idea. Or you have, HTTPS isn't turned on. Oh, did you notice that you haven't upgraded your framework, you're using an old one? And they're adding more of those recommendations all the time. So new recommendations keep coming up. But because I'm obsessed with AppSec, I fixed all of those. But yes, they are adding more and more AppSec recommendations, which is really cool. It's very exciting for me.
And we did say at the beginning we weren't going too deep. We had so much information we couldn't go too deep into that.
Yeah,
it was kind of a little bit out of scope.
But there are a bunch of recommendations. You, sir, this one's for you.
You talked about data classification previous service.
Yes.
So that supports all data flow types. I know SQL database has data classification.
It's for MS SQL databases. Yeah, but you can also, so in Office 365, you can classify things, you can classify your emails and stuff, but and Cosmos DB, but not in third parties. So if you're using MongoDB in Azure, it's not going to have that, as far as I know.
So what about storage or organizing Cosmos DB,
I haven't done it yet, but I believe you can. But I would want to look it up and send you a link to make sure. So I think there's someone here, you, sir.
So most of the applications, most of the hacks that we see are typically because of either misconfiguration or lack of knowledge of configuring those services or applications. So will logs help in those cases?
Sorry, could you say that a bit louder? So we're supposed to be using a mic for the questions, and I totally forgot, and I'm really sorry for those watching the recording. Could you repeat it?
Configuration.
Knowledge of configuring these things, when we are configuring an MSG, we just by configuring a VM, we always enable RDP, or whenever we are opening, creating a web application, we say, oh, it will run on 443, even though we are putting an application gateway in front of it. So
So he's saying, his question, just to repeat, super summary, is like, you know, a lot of the errors that happen in security are like human errors, mistakes. Like we think we know what we're doing, but we just make a mistake, right? And so Azure Security Center points out a lot of your mistakes. It is not perfect. Sometimes there are things that we'll miss, but it has taught me a whole bunch of stuff. Like literally when I started at Microsoft, we're out of time.
We're out of time.
Okay, well, we'll be outside answering questions, but yes, it is, so like as you go through and remediate things, it tells you more things and fixes more things for you, and you learn, and so like now I just follow best practices because it makes me.
And how do we understand the logs? Because we have like application logs and PR logging, we can understand that. But for every Azure service now you need to have diagnostic logs and to know how to do it. We don't understand anything of that.
Okay, so understanding all the logs is a thing that we definitely have to answer in the hallway because that is not a 1-second question. I want to answer more questions,
to go to the stage,
we
but
just got the
we'll go out
beep
there
of
and
get
talk
off
to
the
you guys.
stage, ladies.
Anyone who still has questions.
But I
we'll
still
go
have
out there.
candy, and if you still have questions, we want to answer them for you. Thank you.